Welcome back everybody to linuxacademy.com. My name is Terry, and in today's course we continue our preparation for the Linux Foundation Certified System Administration exam. We're going to continue to be working in our mail area, and in previous videos what we've done is we've installed, which SMTP would be installed by default in most cases, but we've installed and we've configured our SMTP server as well as user aliases so that we can work with our mail subsystem. So now what we're going to do is learn how to restrict access to our SMTP server. This is actually handled from within a single file, and it's our tried and true main.cf file. So if we look at our main.cf file, we'll go to the etc postfix directory that we've been in before. And if we go into our main.cf file, we'll see that there are really 4 things that we can use to restrict access for certain clients for accessing or forwarding through or sending mail to our SMTP server. The first is a way of requiring that any SMTP client says hello, HELO or EHLO, which is a shortcut for hello. It's just the negotiated response from a client to a server to say, open an SMTP channel for me to communicate with you. So what we want to search for is SMTP underscore HELO and required. If it's not already set on our system, then we want to go ahead and add that, because that configuration setting will restrict clients that don't conform to that specific method of introduction for an SMTP service. So in this case, we're going to say we want to require hello or EHLO. So we want to set SMTPD hello required, and then we're going to say equals yes. So any client that comes in to connect to our server is going to have to specify during its introduction negotiation either HELO or EHLO. And if you've used command line utilities for accessing mail before, you're pretty familiar with the hello negotiation. The next thing is about the restrictions for senders. So in other words, we want to be able to reject any request when postfix, in this case SMTP, is not the final destination for the sender address. So in other words, if it's outside of the user accounts that are configured on our local domain, we want to reject the request, because remember, we're just configuring this as a LAN server. So anything connected locally is all we want to be able to do. Now this setting you wouldn't set necessarily if you were a mail forwarding agent for any internet address that you may want to be answering mail for. So if you're setting up an SMTP or postfix server to receive requests and forward them on to other mail servers if they don't happen to be on our network, then you wouldn't set this up here. But what we're going to do here is let's make sure that this particular item isn't set. So SMTPD, let's see if we have any configured options for SMTP. Nope, that was the last one. So what we want to do is we want to reject any non-local destinations for sender. So we do an SMTPD underscore sender restrictions. And once you're able to type it right, unlike me, we're going to say permit underscore my networks, which is anything that we've defined as the my networks. And then we're going to reject unknown sender domain. So anybody that we don't know about and isn't reflected in the permit or in the my networks configuration, we're going to reject. The next thing we're going to be looking for or looking at is we want to reject any requests that come in when the client hello or EHLO command that is used to introduce itself has bad hostname syntax. So in other words, if it doesn't properly identify itself, even after the proper introduction, we want to reject that, because that could be spam related, that could be header related, could be any number of things. So we want to say reject anything that has a bad domain or network address. So we want to do an SMTPD underscore hello restrictions, and then we want to equal that to, again, we're going to permit my networks. So anything that I've previously defined as okay, regardless, I want to go ahead and let in. And then I'm going to reject pretty much anything else. So I'm going to reject invalid hello hostname. Finally, we want to reject any request unless it has two characteristics. Rejecting a request that is the final destination, or postfix is the mail forwarder. So in other words, again, we're setting up a LAN-based connection. So if the request is not this server as the final destination, reject it. If we're getting a request that this particular server is acting only as a mail forwarding agent, we want to reject it. So we want to say reject anything for mail forwarding and non-destinations. In these, you can put whatever commentary in here that makes sense for you. So we're going to do an SMTPD recipient restrictions. We're going to make that equal to, again, we're going to permit anything in my networks, and then we're going to reject pretty much anything else, which is indicated with unauth underscore destination. Once we've got these 4 items in place, and again, don't define them twice if they happen to exist in your configuration. In some versions of postfix, particularly the SMTP hello required, that sometimes is defined by default from within some versions of postfix, and is defined by default in Ubuntu 14.04 LTS. At least it was as late as 14.02. So we're going to go ahead and save this. We'll clear our screen. And if you remember, when we were building the database file for our configuration, we needed to run a command called postmap on the transport directory. And that the transport file, and that transport file built the transport.db by reading in configuration files in main and master.cf. So if we go all the way back to what we did before, we can look that we ran this postmap on etc postfix transport, which then updates the transport DB. You can see that when the file existed before, it was 12.288, but it was last touched on August 31st. Here we've now touched it on September 1st. And equally important, for running that postmap command, by rereading the main configuration file, all of the items that we added to the main configuration file are checked for syntax to be sure that we haven't included or made any mistakes in our syntax for adding these restrictions to the SMTP server. Finally, once that is done, you will need to do the appropriate system management command in order to restart the postfix process, which in our case is systemctl restart and postfix. Once that's been restarted, we'll verify that it is running, and we can see postfix is now running, and those restrictions have been applied to our SMTP server. For restricting access to our postfix SMTP server, that's all there is to it. My name is Terry for Linux Academy.